guys. Well, Michelle Moxley here has a long history in our industry, working for some of the most influential screen printing shops in our industry and creating really beautiful arts and figuring out how to make technology work with t-shirts. She currently works at a company called Mr.
Print.
Mr. Print that manufactures machines. And she's working on some crazy technology called a digital squeegee, which sounds absurd, right? Because squeegees should be analog. Anyways, she's going to be the one that puts us all out of business. So without further ado, thanks a lot, Michelle.
Wow, that was a nice introduction. Best of the day. Hello. My presentation is called Moneyball Screen Printing. It's about data analytics and profitability, so they told me to liven it up, so I'm going to give you a presentation about math. Okay. Sorry. So this is about Company A. Company A, if you look me up, you can figure out what it is. It was a factory that was purchased as is. They were running plastisol. They were transitioned into water-based, and they were transitioned without a lot of training. So we went in and analyzed it. So what you're going to see in this presentation comes under budget. That was where they weren't trained. And then you'll see the progression of when they were and the improvements that were made against the data points. So it's a Central American factory. They have a 3rd to 5th grade education, large labor force. So we had a lot of employees, but this kind of data collection was difficult because it required a lot of computer knowledge and understanding of the data that you were collecting. So we evaluated the employees and assigned them accordingly. This data set in this presentation is about samples because it's a smaller control, so you have a little easier time understanding. Most of what is being presented was also applied to production. The particular brand that's being demonstrated in this presentation was a retail good brand that had 6-month sample to production turn. So we'd receive a request for the first sample and we would be producing it exactly 6 months later. There were multiple sample requests over the course of the 6 months, which was important to the profitability. We maintained 25% or more special effects. So this is really important. With this brand, we didn't really have a cap because we had other retail brands that weren't doing any special effects. In your factories, as you get into special effects, you want to keep in mind there's a sweet spot where you get really profitable. If you do too many, you're spending a lot of time down trying to figure it out, and that would be too many different ones. If you do too few, it's the same reason. You just aren't good at it. So you kind of get good at something that you can sell, get it perfected, get your setup times down, get your efficiencies down, and you'll make a lot of money right here. If you want to explore something new, set some guidelines for yourself. Try something out, try to explore it, but don't beat a dead horse. Don't go out and keep doing it until you have loss. We maintained less than 25% below minimum orders, which was 288 pieces per single setup. If your model is more than that, below minimum, like 288s, if you're running a bunch of 40s, there's new technologies that are good for that, and they won't put you out of business. So this was an 11 automatic press shop. We had 4 oval, 12 color, 32 station, 7 carousel, 18 color, and we were running not 100% water-based, but 100% water-based on this brand, probably 85% water-based in total. So we did have to integrate 2 systems, which can be kind of difficult because you have to be able to operate in 2 systems. So what data did we use? We collected waste data that contributed 40% to the success of this model. The usages was the consumptions of the products, how much we were using in each department. Testing data was our B grade report or a durability report. Inventory, this was against samples, so it was pre-printed inventory or blank inventory for creating samples. Setup times And then other included things like a print information sheet. We would record out all of the jobs as they came in, anticipating what we think the cost would be, how many screens, how many flashes, what special effects, what press it needed to run on. And then that would help us to do scheduling 6 months down the road, and it would also help us to look for any bottlenecks. So if you're scheduling everything onto your large equipment and you're seeing that happen this early in the process, you could anticipate and make changes to your development. Now, this isn't possible if you're running a brand that doesn't have that retail window, which we were, but then you could check it against those brands as well to create a model that would be efficient to keep your factory turning with the most profitability. And then you could also go back and you could check your actual costs against what you estimated and start narrowing those gaps. So in setup data, we collected the screens per day average, how many screens were used on press per day on average, flashes per day average, time per setup. Those first three were really important because you would be able to create a roadmap for your operator. So you would say we had an average of 6 screens with 4 flashes. If that took an hour, here's a list of what you should be doing in that hour, where your physical body needs to be step by step, how you're interacting with each screen. So if you got something that fell outside of that average, you were pretty much already there in practice and just had to adjust either backwards or forwards. We also used per screen setup, that's how many minutes per screen, so that we could target and try to reduce our setups. So the first 3 helped us to create a roadmap for the operator and also for the equipment. If we were using 4 flashes on average, then we would have those staged appropriately around the floor so they were easy access to increase the setup time. If we were using 6 screens per day average, we knew how much was workflow through our screen department and how much needed to be prepared for the following day. Per screen setup is important, and a lot of people go by that in the industry, and it is very critical. It's critical to helping you reduce your setup times. It's not critical for setting your method. Special effects screen average was also very important because sometimes the setups took longer than they needed to. If we had that data, we could identify sources as to why. We could see who was improving faster, and we could schedule jobs and training according to this data. And then set up materials, and that's how many setups shirts were being used on the job. So in the budget analysis, which I mentioned, we had analyzed the factory that had not been trained, and they were using, on average, 158 setup shirts per job, and they were setup times of 48 minutes per screen. After a year and a half of doing training and behavioral improvements and efficiencies, we targeted 32 setup jobs, or 32 setup pieces per press, and that was the oval, so 1 round, and 9 minutes per screen. And keep in mind, 25% special effects. So, multiple data records support your results. If you're only collecting data from a single source, it could be false, it could be misinformed, and it could be skewed. So you collect it from multiple sources and you get more accurate data, you can make more accurate predictions and improvements. So what you see at the top was a setup report off the press, and it showed all the orders that would come in over that 6-month period and give us a total setup by article rate. Well, this particular report is missing any of the further orders, and it has a setup article rate of 1. We targeted that number and tried to reduce it. Not less than 1, but you'll see. Setup was considered touching the first screen to handing the QC a finished sample. If the QC rejected it based on aesthetic, then it transferred to the QC setup report. If the QC rejected it based on operator error, the time continued. And if it was rejected based on art or screens, then it went back into art, and then it was the article rate that went up. So this is a setup report. It shows how many setup shirts were used. It was targeted in green, yellow, or red. They had to write an explanation if they were in yellow or red. Those meant they were either out of range or out of target. If you see the per screen minutes on the right in 9, and then underneath it says target of 9, they were in yellow because they needed to come under target. And We did how many minutes start to finish. This was recorded by the sample manager. All of the teams were required to do 3 setups per day, get them approved, and there were 5 teams. They had to complete all of that as a whole unit, and then they would win a incentive prize. It was meal tickets, so they got a free lunch. And this was a big deal because it's cash basically in their pocket. But they could only win it as a unit. The whole sample team had to do it together. So the jobs would be scheduled and assigned according to ability. And then if you finished ahead, you went over to another press and you assisted so that they could finish as well. And I spoke to a water-based screen printer in the United States that's using an incentive method on Tuesday. They do, when you're new hire, I think it's 3 months on press with a trainer, and then at the end, if you graduate, you get a $1.25 raise, and the guy that trained you gets $100. The ROI on that was much higher than just throwing them into the mix. People give up with water-based. It's hard work. Inventory data, so this was the blanks for setups. So we kept an inventory of all the blanks that we used with this retail brand so that we could minimize the number of setups. We kept printed reorders, so we would make a linear regression curve to analyze the data and estimate how many pieces they would order against each style for the season. We would print to that on the first order, and we would analyze the number of rejects of the styles to decide if that was a profitable model or not. It basically was profitable unless we got rejected on 90% of the work. If we did get rejected on that much of the work, there was another problem. So we printed what we estimated to be the total sample season at the first setup. At the end of the season, if they hadn't ordered all the pieces, they were transferred into production. So we tried to target an per article rate of 1. That's the per article rate. And then we could set new goals. So this doesn't include the budget analysis. This is 6 months in. I didn't analyze at budget because it was about 4 times they were setting everything up. We were at 1.97, and then a year and a half, we were at 1.15. So we were setting everything up 1.15 times before production with all of the sample orders. This is a pre-printed inventory list. So this was the data that we collected after we printed. We would evaluate everything through QC, set it as A grade, B grade, C grade, put it into its appropriate bucket, and then store it for reorders. So this shows all the A grade inventory against those styles. This was our blank inventory. So this was set and analyzed from data from previous seasons. Now I realize that you might not be working on a retail brand that takes 6 months. But if you are working in any kind of pattern, analyze the data and see if you can target and reduce what your materials are. So in this case, we targeted 2 seasons. We would estimate what they would order over the course of 2 seasons and store that in blank inventory. If they dropped a style of fabric for some reason, we would put it immediately into production. So there was 0 waste. Testing data. This is your B grade report, this is the durability report. So this gave us reasons for failures. It gave us specifics about execution all the way to retail, and it gave us the opportunity to try out anything that we wanted to analyze for efficiencies. So this report has like the shirt color, the style name, the date it was printed, the oven it was printed on, the temperature on the panel, the oven speed, the actual temperature with a donut probe, the actual oven speed with a stopwatch, the number of times it was washed and dried, which was set by a standard with this brand, and then if it passed, and if it was rejected, what the comments were against that. This is a B grade report from production. This report had 200,000 pieces. It was a 1-week report. They had 713 rejects out of the 200,000 pieces. 65% of what's on this report is print process related. This is a 0.35% B grade rate for that week. So they had 25 data points. 11 were print related. 12 were textile related. 3 were art and screen related. We took this report, we would analyze it and say, okay, what's our biggest contributing factor to rejects? For a while, it was lint, and it kept hitting the top of the list. So we put it through development. How can we control lint? What can we do to minimize it? It's water-based. It collects lint fibers. It's very static-driven. We added a screen in the beginning of the rotation that we didn't charge for. It had clear water base in it. We printed that underneath the base, and we picked up all the lint off the shirts. As it started to run, you see it get dirty. You stop for a break. You clean that ink out. You put new ink in. You keep picking lint up. On this report, lint was less than 6% and accounted for a total of 63 pieces out of 200,000. We used this report to create method. So we also collected usage data, so consumption per product, and be able to track product throughout the factory. So that's each product that we used in each department, how it was consumed and where it was going. So we could see it in inventory, we could see it in the ink room, we could see it on the floor, and it helped us introduce cost savings. So this isn't our actual cost per impression, but at the budget estimate, it went from that amount by the first training, it halved. Our ink cost halved. All we did was train the operators to use it more properly. By August of 2018, we went down several more percentage points just by targeting it and trying to reduce our waste. So our daily ink report showed all of the products that we used, how many grams we consumed daily, and then gave us an average of consumption across the top. The average of consumption allowed us to check inventories and build proper inventories for consumption so we weren't overbuying or underbuying, and it also helped us track if things were being misused. Additives are addictive, guys. People put them in everything. So you watch this daily, you know what's going on your floor. Now you know why your shirts failed when they went through wash. All products consumed, average of all products consumed. And then we had a daily screen report that did the same thing. I'm not gonna go into screens. That is something that you should spend a lot of time with. That's really where learning water base is. Make better screens, and you'll be better at it. And this is an average of all products consumed daily. It showed all of our breakages. We knew how much emulsion was on each screen. We weighed it, we divided it against. We knew how much HD emulsion was on each screen. You could see what was being misused. We tried to target and reduce so our consumable cost would go down. So waste data, biggest contributing factor to the success of this model. It gave us the largest margin increase. It gave us behavior improvements. It helped us reduce waste overall, and it gave us the largest efficiency increase. So when we started this project, we went in and we had a unique opportunity to print 1.5 million left sleeve units with a white logo. It was water-based. They were going to be printed elsewhere around the world and recured. So we used 4 screens of white so that, because we didn't know exactly how it would be cured and we wanted to make sure it didn't have any durability issues, we went a little overboard. So I went in and we labeled each screen A, B, C, and D. They each had the exact same ink in it, but the operators didn't know that. And Omar, who's not here, helped me make a squeegee, because they were left sleeves, so we used sleeve pallets. But we took a squeegee and we cut little notches out of it. I'm doing a Pepe. And so that way we could keep the ink moving in the screen, so it wouldn't have any areas where it was changing dramatically, either from heat or exposures. And then we took empty drums and we put them on the floor labeled A, B, C, and D. And we took away all the trash cans in the plant. The only ones that were left were in the bathroom. And we told the guys, look, you're gonna take the letter and put it in the corresponding screen. We standardized all the presses, flashes, screens. We were running carousels with the same flash. And we said, put A in A, B in B, and so forth. At the end of your shift, whatever you want to take out and throw away, put into the corresponding receptacle marked A. Anything that's still in good condition, take back to the ink room. The ink room was trained to refresh the ink using new ink. They would put it in, drill it together, make fresh ink, give it back to the floor. At the end of their shift, they would go out and take what was in receptacle A, pull it back into the ink room, pull out anything that was considerably dead, like hard, put that into a container and re-drill and give that ink back to the floor. We disrupted the behavior of just throwing things away. This is what people do. We don't think about it. We just behave this way. And we end up with these huge waste models that are very expensive to our bottom line. So At the end of 1.5 million units, we had one 30-kilogram drum of what would be considered dead ink, and we put a very strong reducer in it, brought it back to life, and used it for training. So 1.5 million units, we essentially had zero waste on a consumable that has waste. So we took that shop-wide. The budget estimate, if you include screens, squeegees, tape, consumable ink waste, we were averaging about 28% consumable waste. By August of 2018, we were at 2.5%. We were essentially throwing nothing away. What you're buying in water-based has a consumable cost, but if you look at what you're throwing away, it'll teach you how to use it better. When we did this, we started getting curious about plastisol, and we went and looked at it, and we didn't even realize how much we were throwing away because we weren't paying attention. So this is an analysis of the ink costs over the time that we did this study and changed this factory. After we had done the initial ink trading, we had 14% total ink waste. 0.11% was bad ink, 14% was setup shirts. I didn't target both of them at the same time. This is all about baby steps. You set one target, you take tiny little achievable steps, and you congratulate with incentives, and you guys get really efficient. After we targeted bad ink and made better behaviors about it, we targeted setup shirts. This is 1 year later. We had 1.5 total ink waste, 0.12 bad ink, we went up, and 1.39% setup shirts. So we eliminated waste. So the results of Company A, what happened? Well, we did that because this factory was bought and basically they weren't going to make any investment in it and it wasn't making any profit. So without any investment, we came up with this model. The results were we got a margin over 35% on screen print alone. You can look up who I worked for. We weren't allowed to include the blank in this model. We won a vendor speed award. We were the first factory outside of Asia to ever win the award. That was an accident. We went from 4 million to 12 million unit increase on that brand. And then we had additional retail brand growth. They've doubled almost in their press capacity. They've added new presses. They bought a digital squeegee. And this is them winning the award in Asia. Look at what you throw away. It'll teach you how to print better. That's the big message of Moneyball. That's all.